The hallways of Skyline Technologies always seemed bigger at night. The echo of a lone mop bucket rolling across the polished floor bounced off the walls as Michael made his way through the executive floor. At 32, he wasn't where he thought he'd be in life, but he carried himself with a quiet dignity that many missed when they passed him during the day, barely offering a nod or smile. Most employees had gone home hours ago, leaving only the soft glow of security lights and the occasional hum of the floor polisher to keep Michael company. He preferred it this way. The night shift meant fewer awkward exchanges with people who looked through him rather than at him. Plus, the night shift pay difference helped with his mother's growing medical bills. "Another late one, Mr. Chen," Michael called out as he noticed the light still streaming from the CEO's office at the end of the hall. Robert Chen, founder and CEO of Skyline Technologies, looked up from his computer and offered a tired smile. "Just finishing up some reports. Don't mind me, keep doing what you're doing." Michael nodded and continued mopping, stealing glances at the framed photographs that lined the hallway. They told the story of Skyline's rise from a small startup to one of the most influential tech companies in the region. In the center of these achievements was Chen, always impeccably dressed in suits that probably cost more than Michael made in a month. But it wasn't envy that Michael felt when he looked at these images. It was something closer to determination. He had his reasons for being here, reasons that went far beyond the paycheck. As he worked his way down the hallway, Michael paused near a newer photograph. Unlike the others showcasing business achievements, this one was personal. Robert Chen stood with his arm around a teenage girl, both of them smiling against a backdrop of mountains. The girl looked about 16 or 17, with the same sharp, intelligent eyes as her father, but there was something in her expression that spoke of hidden pain. Michael knew her name was Lily. He also knew she hadn't spoken a word since the car accident 3 years ago that had taken her mother's life. This wasn't common knowledge around the office. Most employees knew the CEO's wife had died, but few were aware that his daughter had been in the car too, or that she had emerged from the physical injuries only to retreat into complete silence. Michael knew because he had done his research extensively before applying for this specific job. What no one at Skyline Technologies knew was that before life had taken an unexpected turn, Michael had been on his way to becoming a successful music therapist. He had graduated near the top of his class, completed an impressive internship at a children's hospital, and had just begun building a client base when his mother's diagnosis changed everything. The mounting medical bills had forced him to set aside his career goals and take whatever jobs would help keep them afloat. When he'd spotted the night janitor position at Skyline, it had seemed like just another job, until he learned who ran the company and about the CEO's daughter. Michael finished mopping the executive floor and moved his cart toward the elevator. As he waited, he pulled out his phone and reviewed the notes from the latest research paper he'd been studying on trauma-induced mutism and music therapy interventions. He'd been keeping up with his field despite everything, reading studies late into the night after his shifts ended. The elevator doors opened, revealing not an empty car but a teenage girl sitting cross-legged on the floor with a sketchbook open in her lap. Lily Chen looked up, momentarily startled, then quickly lowered her eyes back to her drawing. "Sorry," Michael said, hesitating with his mop bucket. "I can catch the next one." Lily shook her head and scooted to one side, making room for him and his cleaning cart. Michael nodded his thanks and wheeled the bucket in, careful not to splash any water. He pressed the button for the lobby. As the elevator began its descent, Michael noticed Lily's sketchbook out of the corner of his eye. She was drawing what appeared to be a series of sound waves rendered with remarkable precision. Beneath them, musical notation flowed across the page. "That's really good," he said quietly, pointing to the drawing. "Are you into music theory?" Lily looked up, surprise flickering across her face at the specific question. Most people just commented on how pretty her drawings were. She gave a small nod. "The way you've connected the waveforms to the notation is clever," Michael continued. "Reminds me of a visualization project we did in my acoustics class in college." The elevator reached the lobby, and Michael rolled his cart out. To his surprise, Lily followed, her sketchbook clutched to her chest. She tilted her head, a question in her eyes. "I studied music therapy," he explained, answering her unspoken question. "Specialized in trauma recovery and neurological music interventions." Lily's eyes widened slightly. She opened her sketchbook, flipped to a blank page, and quickly wrote something down. She held it up. "Why are you working as a janitor then?" Michael smiled, though there was sadness behind it. "Life takes unexpected turns sometimes. My mom got sick, cancer, and the medical bills piled up. Had to put my career on hold." Lily nodded, understanding in her eyes. She wrote again, "I'm sorry about your mom. Is she okay?" "She's fighting," Michael replied. "Tough woman, my mother. Raised me on her own, working 2 jobs most of my childhood. Now it's my turn to take care of her." A noise from across the lobby caught their attention. Robert Chen was walking briskly toward them, concern etched on his face. "Lily, I was looking for you upstairs." His eyes darted between his daughter and Michael, taking in the situation. "Everything okay?" Lily nodded and held up her sketchbook, showing her father the brief written conversation. Robert's expression softened slightly as he read it. He looked at Michael with new interest. "You're a music therapist?" "Was," Michael corrected gently. "Currently, I'm your night janitor." He extended his hand. "Michael Turner." Robert shook it firmly. "Robert Chen. I've seen you around, but I don't think we've formally met." His gaze lingered on Michael's face as if seeing him clearly for the first time. "How long have you been working here?" "About 3 months now," Robert nodded slowly. "And you specifically chose Skyline Technologies?" Michael hesitated, weighing his next words carefully. "I apply everywhere that's hiring, Mr. Chen. But yes, I knew about Skyline's reputation as a good employer." Lily was watching this exchange with interest, her eyes moving between her father and Michael. She tugged at her father's sleeve and wrote something in her book, angling it so only he could see. Robert read it and cleared his throat. "Well, Mr. Turner, it seems we've kept you from your work long enough. Thank you for being kind to my daughter." Michael nodded. "No problem at all, sir. Have a good night." As the Chens walked toward the parking garage, Michael returned to his duties, but his mind was racing. This wasn't how he had planned to make their acquaintance. But sometimes opportunities presented themselves in unexpected ways. Later that night, as Michael waited at the bus stop after his shift, his phone chimed with an email notification. The subject line made his heart skip. "Regarding your previous experience, R. Chen, Skyline Technologies." He opened it with trembling fingers, reading quickly. "Mr. Turner, after our brief conversation this evening, my daughter shared something remarkable with me. She felt comfortable communicating with you. As you may know, this is not common for her. I would like to discuss something with you regarding your background in music therapy. Would you be available to meet in my office tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m., before your regular shift begins? Robert Chen, CEO, Skyline Technologies." Michael read the email 3 times, his mind whirling with possibilities. This was happening much sooner than he'd anticipated. He had imagined it might take months to gain the trust necessary to even suggest his real intentions. As the bus pulled up, Michael sent a quick reply confirming the meeting. He looked up at the starlit sky and allowed himself, for the first time in years, to feel a flicker of hope, not just for himself and his career, but for Lily Chen, a young girl trapped in silence. What Robert Chen didn't know, what no one knew, was that Michael hadn't ended up at Skyline by chance. He had researched dozens of companies before applying, looking specifically for this opportunity. News articles about the tragic accident that claimed Susan Chen's life had mentioned that her daughter had been in the car but survived. Subsequent society page mentions of the Chens had noted the daughter's absence from events she'd previously attended, or in rare appearances, described her as not speaking to reporters. Michael had connected the dots and recognized the symptoms of trauma-induced mutism from his training. When he discovered that Robert Chen frequently brought his daughter to work with him, Michael had applied for the night janitor position immediately. His plan wasn't about money or advancing his career. It was about helping someone who needed exactly the kind of therapy he was trained to provide, someone who might otherwise never get the specific help she needed. If he could make a difference in Lily's life, maybe he could finally fulfill the purpose he'd felt slipping away with each passing month of pushing mops instead of helping patients. As the bus rumbled through the darkened streets, Michael reviewed everything he knew about trauma recovery and selective mutism. Tomorrow's meeting could change everything, for Lily, for him, and perhaps for his mother too, if it led to better employment. But he reminded himself to be patient. Trust would need to be earned, and recovery couldn't be rushed. Little did Michael know that his simple act of recognizing the music theory in Lily's drawings had already set something profound in motion. Sometimes the journey back to one's voice begins with someone who truly sees you, even when you can't speak. Michael arrived at Skyline Technologies the next day 30 minutes before his meeting with Robert Chen. He'd traded his usual janitor's uniform for the nicest clothes he owned, dark slacks and a button-down shirt he normally saved for special occasions. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his collar in the reflection of the lobby's glass doors. The receptionist looked surprised to see him there in the afternoon, dressed differently than usual, but smiled politely as he explained about the meeting. "Mr. Chen is expecting you," she said after checking her computer. "You can go right up." The executive floor felt different in daylight. Busy professionals hurried past, engrossed in conversations or tapping away at their phones. A few glanced at Michael curiously, clearly wondering what business the night janitor had in the executive suite during business hours. As he approached Chen's office, Michael spotted Lily sitting in the atrium near her father's office. She was at a small table, headphones on, focused intently on her sketchbook. Without the darkness of night to hide in, Michael could see her more clearly now. The slight furrow in her brow as she concentrated, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear every few minutes, the precision with which she handled her pencils. Just as he was about to continue to Robert's office, a commotion near the elevator caught his attention. A delivery man was arguing with the receptionist, his voice rising in frustration. "I don't care about your protocols. I have a time-sensitive delivery for Mr. Chen, and I was told to hand it to him personally." The receptionist maintained her professional demeanor, though her patience was clearly wearing thin. "Sir, as I've explained, all deliveries must be processed through reception. I'll make sure Mr. Chen receives it immediately." "Not good enough." The man tried to push past her, his bulky package clutched tightly under his arm. Security was already moving toward them when Lily suddenly appeared at the receptionist's desk, having noticed the commotion. She made a gesture, trying to communicate something to the delivery man, but he ignored her, assuming she was just another employee trying to block his way. "Move, kid," he snapped, his frustration boiling over. Michael stepped forward without thinking. "She's trying to help you," he said firmly, positioning himself between Lily and the agitated man. "And she's Mr. Chen's daughter." That got the man's attention. He blinked, looking at Lily with new eyes. "Oh, Michael turned to Lily and signed, his hands moving fluidly. "Can I help translate for you?" Surprise flickered across her face, followed by relief. She nodded and signed back. "Tell him Dad is on a call, but we'll be free in 5 minutes. He can wait in the conference room if it's truly urgent." Michael relayed the message, adding, "The package will get to Mr. Chen faster if you follow protocol. Creating a scene only delays things." The delivery man deflated, his anger dissolving into embarrassment. 5 minutes, you said?" The receptionist, looking relieved, directed him to a small waiting area. As he walked away, she turned to Michael with newfound respect. "Thank you for stepping in, and I didn't know you knew sign language. Part of my training," Michael explained simply, not wanting to get into his background. Lily was still standing nearby, watching him with intense curiosity. She signed, "How many languages do you speak?" "English, sign language, and enough Spanish to get by," he replied, both verbally and with signs. Music is its own language too, in a way. From his office doorway, Robert Chen cleared his throat. "Mr. Turner, I see you've already been busy making yourself useful." His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or calculation. "Just happened to be in the right place," Michael said, suddenly aware of how many people were watching this interaction. "Come in." Robert gestured to his office, then turned to his daughter. "Lily, would you join us, please?" The CEO's office was exactly what Michael had expected, spacious and immaculately furnished, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Awards and photographs lined the walls, telling the story of Skyline's success, much like the hallway displays Michael cleaned each night. "Please sit." Robert indicated a chair across from his desk. Lily took a seat on a small couch by the window, her sketchbook still clutched in her hands. Robert remained standing, studying Michael with careful consideration. "My daughter showed me something interesting last night. She wrote more in her notebook after meeting you than she has in months." He paused, Then this afternoon I see you communicating with her in sign language, something you neglected to mention on your job application, along with your background in music therapy. Michael met his gaze steadily. My application was for a janitorial position, sir. My previous education didn't seem relevant. And yet here we are. Robert's tone was measured but not unkind. Why did you really come to work at Skyline, Mr. Turner? The direct question caught Michael off guard. He glanced at Lily, who was watching him intently, then back to Robert. The truth, he decided, was his only option. I came because of Lily, he admitted. Not in any inappropriate way, he added quickly, seeing Robert's expression harden. I read about the accident in the news. Later articles mentioned that your daughter no longer spoke at public events. As someone trained in music therapy for trauma recovery, I thought I might be able to help. Robert's face remained impassive. So you took a job as a night janitor on the off chance you might somehow get close enough to my daughter to what, cure her? Put that way, it sounded presumptuous, even creepy. Michael winced. I know how it sounds. I didn't have a specific plan. He struggled to explain his motivation without sounding self-righteous. I've been unable to practice my profession due to financial circumstances, but that doesn't mean I stopped caring about helping people. When I recognized a situation where my training might be useful, I couldn't ignore it. Lily had been watching this exchange with growing interest. She opened her sketchbook and wrote something, then stood and handed it to her father. Robert read it silently, his expression softening slightly. He turned to Michael. My daughter would like to know what kind of music therapy you would recommend for someone in her situation. Hypothetically speaking, Michael took a deep breath, grateful for the chance to speak about his profession. For trauma-induced selective mutism, I'd start with something called the ISO principle, meeting the person exactly where they are emotionally through music that resonates with their current state. No pressure to participate verbally, just creating a safe space where music becomes the primary language. He continued, warming to the subject. Simple humming exercises can be incredibly effective because they engage different neural pathways than speech. Drumming too, because it connects with our most primal rhythms, heartbeat, breathing. These approaches bypass the trauma response that might be blocking verbal expression. As he spoke, he noticed Lily leaning forward, her full attention on him. Robert was watching his daughter's reaction more than listening to Michael's words. The beautiful thing about music therapy, Michael added, is that it doesn't demand words. It offers alternative paths to expression while gently rebuilding the neural connections that trauma may have disrupted. When he finished, the office was quiet for a moment. Robert looked at his daughter. What do you think, Lily? She wrote in her book again and showed it to her father. Robert read it, then looked at Michael with newfound consideration. Mr. Turner, would you consider a different position here at Skyline, one that would make better use of your actual skills? Michael blinked, caught off guard by the sudden turn in the conversation. What kind of position? A therapeutic consultant initially, working primarily with Lily, 3 sessions a week. Robert named a figure that was more than double what Michael made as a janitor. We can discuss longer-term possibilities depending on how things progress. The offer was unexpected and generous, but Michael hesitated. Mr. Chen, I appreciate the offer, but I should be clear about something. There are no guarantees with therapy, especially for trauma recovery. It's a process and progress can be slow. I understand that, Robert replied. We've tried traditional speech therapy without success. Perhaps a different approach is worth exploring. Lily nodded emphatically, then wrote something else and showed it to Michael directly. I want to try. Music makes more sense to me than words anyway. How could he say no to that? When would you want to start? How about tomorrow afternoon? Robert suggested. We can use the small conference room on this floor. It has a piano, though it's rarely used. Michael nodded, his mind already running through potential approaches for their first session. That would work. I'd need to keep my evening janitorial shifts for now, though, if that's all right, at least until we see if this arrangement is going to work out. Of course, Robert agreed. We can revisit that arrangement in a few weeks. As Michael left the office building that evening, walking to the bus stop instead of starting his usual shift, he felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The opportunity was exactly what he'd hoped for. Yet now that it was happening, the weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. What if he couldn't help Lily? What if his skills had grown rusty while he'd been pushing a mop instead of practicing his profession? The doubt must have shown on his face because when his phone rang and he saw his mother's name on the screen, her first words after he answered were, "What's wrong, Michael?" "You sound worried," he smiled despite himself. She could always read him, even through the phone. "Nothing's wrong, Mom. Actually, something kind of amazing happened today." As he told her about the meeting and the new opportunity, his mother's excitement grew. "I always knew you'd find your way back to your calling," she said, her voice warm with pride. "This is just the beginning." Michael hoped she was right. Tomorrow would be his first real test, not just of his professional skills, but of his belief that music could build bridges where words had failed. For Lily's sake, and maybe a bit for his own, he needed to succeed. The small conference room on the executive floor had been transformed. Gone were the long table and office chairs that normally filled the space. Instead, a baby grand piano that had been gathering dust in the corner was now positioned centrally, its lid propped open. Beside it sat a collection of instruments, a wooden djembe drum, a set of hand chimes, a guitar, and various smaller percussion pieces that Michael had brought from his apartment. He arrived early to set up, arranging everything with care. This first session would set the tone for all that followed, and he wanted the environment to feel inviting rather than clinical. He'd brought a small area rug to define the music space and placed several comfortable floor cushions around it. When Robert arrived with Lily, Michael was tuning the guitar. He looked up with a smile that masked his nervousness. "Good afternoon." Robert looked around the transformed space with raised eyebrows. "You've been busy." "The environment matters," Michael explained, setting the guitar aside. "Music therapy works best in a space that feels separate from everyday life, a place where normal rules and expectations can be set aside." Lily was taking in the instruments with obvious interest, her eyes lingering on the piano. She carried her ever-present sketchbook under one arm. "I have some paperwork for you," Robert said, handing Michael a folder. "Standard consultant agreement plus some confidentiality forms." "Thank you." Michael accepted the folder but didn't open it. "Before we begin, I'd like to talk about how these sessions will work." He gestured to the chairs he'd left near the door. "Shall we?" Once they were seated, Michael addressed Robert directly. "I notice you're planning to stay for the session?" "That's right," Robert said firmly. "I want to see what this involves." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "I understand, and I don't have any objections to your presence. But I do want to establish some ground rules." He turned to include Lily in the conversation. "Music therapy is about creating a safe space for emotional expression. For that to work, there can't be any pressure to perform or achieve specific results." "I'm not here to pressure anyone," Robert said, a hint of defensiveness in his tone. "Not intentionally," Michael agreed, "but your position as both Lily's father and my employer creates an underlying expectation. Lily may feel she needs to show progress to please you, and I might feel the same way to justify your investment." Robert frowned slightly. "What are you suggesting?" "That you're welcome to observe today, but after that, perhaps you could give us the space to work without an audience. At the end of each week, we can meet to discuss progress and approach." Lily was watching this exchange with interest. She opened her sketchbook and wrote something, then showed it to her father. Robert read it and sighed. "Lily agrees with you. She'd prefer I not stay for the actual sessions." He didn't look pleased, but he nodded reluctantly. "I'll respect that, but I'd like a detailed briefing after each session." "Of course," Michael agreed. With Lily's input and consent about what's shared, Robert checked his watch. "I have a meeting in 20 minutes anyway. I'll leave you to it, but I'd like to see how you start. At least." "Fair enough." Michael stood and moved to the center of the room, inviting Lily to join him. What happened next surprised everyone, even Michael himself. Instead of beginning with the gentle introduction to instruments he had planned, Michael found himself saying, "Lily, I'd like to try something a bit unusual to start. Would that be okay?" She nodded, curiosity evident in her expression. "I'm not going to ask you to speak," Michael continued. "In fact, I'm going to ask you not to try to form words at all during our sessions together. At least for now." Robert straightened in his chair. "I thought the goal was to help her speak again." "It is," Michael confirmed. "But sometimes the direct approach creates too much pressure instead." He turned back to Lily. "I'm going to ask you to hum." "Hum?" Robert repeated, confusion evident in his voice. Just make humming sounds? Exactly, Michael said, his eyes still on Lily. But only if and when you feel comfortable doing so. No pressure, no expectations. Humming engages different neural pathways than speech. It's more connected to our emotional centers than our language centers. Lily tilted her head, considering this request. She wrote in her book, "You don't want me to try to talk?" Not yet, Michael confirmed. I want to remove that pressure entirely. Instead, we'll build a foundation using different forms of expression. Humming, rhythm, melody. We'll let your voice find its way back naturally without forcing it. Robert was watching with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. This seems counterintuitive. The most effective approaches often are, Michael replied with a small smile. He turned to Lily. What do you think? Are you willing to try? She considered for a moment, then nodded. Michael picked up the djembe drum and sat cross-legged on one of the cushions, inviting Lily to sit opposite him. I'm going to play a simple rhythm. Just listen at first, then if you feel comfortable, you can tap along on your knees. He began a gentle, steady beat on the drum. Nothing complex, just a heartbeat-like rhythm that filled the quiet room. Robert watched from his chair by the door, his expression unreadable. After about a minute, Lily began to tap her fingers lightly on her knees, matching Michael's rhythm. He smiled encouragingly but didn't comment, allowing the moment to unfold naturally. Now I'm going to add some simple humming, Michael said, continuing the drum pattern. He began to hum a low, simple tone that complemented the rhythm. Again, nothing complex, just a single note held steady, then shifting occasionally to create a simple melody. Lily watched intently, her hands still tapping the rhythm. Michael hummed for another minute, then gradually stopped, though he continued the drum pattern. The room filled with just the sound of the drum. Michael didn't pressure Lily or even look at her expectantly. He simply continued the steady beat, creating a space where she could join in if she chose to. Robert checked his watch again and stood quietly. I need to go to my meeting. I'll be back in an hour. His voice held a trace of disappointment, as if he'd expected some immediate breakthrough. After Robert left, Michael continued the rhythm for another moment, then gradually slowed to a stop. How are you feeling? He asked Lily. She picked up her sketchbook and wrote, Strange, but okay, Michael nodded. That's normal. This is all new. Over the next 45 minutes, Michael introduced Lily to several instruments, encouraging her to explore their sounds without any pressure to create music in a traditional sense. She seemed particularly drawn to the piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys, experimenting with different combinations of notes. Music is just organized sound, Michael explained as she played a discordant cluster of notes. There's no right or wrong way to express yourself here. Toward the end of the session, Michael returned to the drum and began the same simple rhythm from the beginning. This time he didn't hum, just maintained the steady beat and watched as Lily instinctively began to tap along. The moment stretched between them, filled only with the sound of the drum and Lily's tapping. Then, so quietly it was barely audible, a sound emerged from Lily, a soft, uncertain hum that lasted just a few seconds before fading away. Michael gave no outward reaction other than a warm smile. He didn't want to make her self-conscious or feel that the hum was a performance to be evaluated. Instead, he simply continued the rhythm, creating space for her to continue if she chose to. She didn't hum again during that session, but something had shifted. Michael could see it in her posture, which had relaxed slightly, and in her eyes, which seemed less guarded. When Robert returned at the end of the hour, Lily was experimenting with the hand chimes while Michael accompanied her on guitar. The sounds they created weren't melodic in any traditional sense, but they filled the room with a peaceful atmosphere. How did it go? Robert asked, looking between them. Before Michael could answer, Lily showed her father her sketchbook where she'd written, Good. I want to come back tomorrow. Robert raised his eyebrows. I thought we agreed on 3 sessions per week. Lily shrugged and wrote again, I like it here. We should stick to our original schedule, Michael suggested gently. Too much too quickly can sometimes be counterproductive. It's important to have time to process between sessions. Lily looked disappointed but nodded in acceptance. Was there any progress? Robert asked Michael quietly as Lily gathered her things. Michael considered his answer carefully. There was engagement, which is the first step. Lily participated fully and showed interest in continuing. That's significant, but no speaking. Robert clarified, unable to hide his disappointment. Mr. Chen, Michael said with gentle firmness, this isn't a quick fix. We're rebuilding neural pathways that have been redirected by trauma. It's more like physical therapy than flipping a switch. Robert sighed. I know, I miss her voice. The raw emotion in those simple words caught Michael off guard. For all his wealth and power, Robert Chen was, at his core, just a father who wanted to hear his daughter speak again. I understand, Michael said softly, but rushing the process won't help. Trust takes time to build, and that's what we're doing here. Building trust, not just between Lily and me, but between Lily and her own voice. As they left the conference room, Michael noticed Lily lingering by the piano, her fingers lightly touching the keys without pressing them. There was longing in the gesture, a desire to express something that had no words. In that moment, Michael knew with certainty that the path he'd chosen was the right one. Lily had music inside her waiting to be released, and with it eventually would come her words. 2 weeks into their sessions, Michael noticed a pattern. Whenever he played certain chord progressions on the piano, Lily's humming became more confident. It started as barely audible sounds, but gradually evolved into something more melodic. She still didn't use words, but the humming itself was becoming a form of expression, sometimes melancholy, sometimes playful, depending on her mood. After their 6th session, as Michael was putting away the instruments, Robert knocked on the doorframe. Got a minute? Of course. Michael set down the guitar he'd been storing. Lily headed home. Her driver just picked her up. Robert entered the room, hands in his pockets. I wanted to talk to you privately. Something in his tone made Michael pause. Is everything okay? Robert gestured to the chairs. Let's sit. Once they were seated, Robert leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I need to understand what your real plan is here. The directness of the question caught Michael off guard. I'm not sure what you mean. When I hired you, you said progress would be slow. I accepted that. But after 2 weeks, all my daughter is doing is humming. Robert's voice wasn't angry, but there was frustration beneath his measured tone. She still isn't speaking. She still uses her notebook to communicate. From where I'm standing, nothing has changed. Michael took a deep breath. Mr. Chen, there's actually been significant progress, though it might not be obvious from the outside. Explain. The humming Lily does now is different from when we started. It's more controlled, more intentional. She's beginning to use it to express emotions. Different tones for different feelings. Michael leaned forward, matching Robert's posture. But that's just the surface. What's happening beneath is even more important. Robert raised an eyebrow. Which is? Her brain is forming new neural pathways. When trauma disrupts our ability to communicate, it's not usually because we've forgotten how. It's because the path between thought and expression has been blocked or diverted. What we're doing with the humming is creating an alternate route. Michael stood and walked to the whiteboard on the wall. He picked up a marker and drew a simple diagram. 2 circles connected by several lines. Think of it like this. If the main road between 2 towns is blocked by a landslide, you don't just keep trying to use that same road. You find or build another way around. He drew another line connecting the circles. That's what we're doing with Lily. The humming is creating a new road that bypasses the blockage. Once that road is established and feels safe, we can start expanding it to include more complex forms of expression. Robert studied the diagram. And you're sure this approach works? I've seen it work, yes, Michael confirmed. With a teenage boy who stopped speaking after witnessing a violent crime. With a young woman who developed selective mutism after a severe car accident. He set the marker down. Every case is different, but the principles are sound. How long did it take for them to speak again? The boy, 3 months. The woman, almost a year. Michael met Robert's gaze directly. I can't promise you a timeline. What I can promise is that I'm not just making this up as I go along. There's a method here, a progression. The humming isn't the end goal, it's the foundation. Robert was silent for a long moment. What's the next step then? We've already started it, Michael explained. Connecting the humming to specific emotions.
Next, we'll move to vocalization without words, sounds that express feelings more directly.
After that, we'll work on single words, starting with those that have strong emotional resonance for Lily. Like what? Michael hesitated. That's for Lily to decide. words that matter to her. Names of people she loves, perhaps, places that make her feel safe. The mention of love and safety seemed to hit something in Robert. His professional demeanor cracked slightly, revealing the worried father underneath. She used to sing, he said quietly. Before the accident. Not professionally or anything, just around the house in the shower. She had a beautiful voice. I'm not surprised, Michael said gently. Her humming shows excellent pitch control. That musical foundation will help us. Robert stood and walked to the window. You know what tomorrow is? Michael thought for a moment, then realized. The anniversary of the accident? Robert nodded without turning around. 3 years. His reflection in the window looked tired, older than his actual age. My wife's parents are flying in. They visit her grave every year. They want Lily to go with them. Will she? She hasn't decided yet. She hasn't been back to the cemetery since the funeral. Robert finally turned to face Michael. I'm not sure what's best for her. Would it help her healing process or set her back? Michael chose his words carefully. I can't answer that. Everyone processes grief differently. But I do think it should be Lily's choice without pressure either way. Robert nodded slowly. That's what I thought too. He checked his watch. I should get going. We have dinner reservations with her grandparents. As he headed for the door, he paused. Lily asked if you'd come to the office tomorrow, even though it's not one of our scheduled days. I told her I'd ask you. Of course, Michael said without hesitation. What time? She usually comes in around 10. I have meetings all morning, but she likes to sit in the atrium and draw. I'll be there. After Robert left, Michael stayed behind, thinking about what the next day might bring. The anniversary would be emotionally charged for Lily, which could either open a door to break through or reinforce her walls. He needed to be prepared for either possibility. The next morning, Michael arrived at Skyline Technologies just before 10. He'd been up late researching grief processing in adolescence and reviewing his notes on Lily's progress. He carried his guitar case and a small bag containing a few selected instruments that might be helpful. The receptionist greeted him with a smile, now familiar with his consultant role. She's already here, she said, nodding toward the atrium. Been sitting there since her dad arrived at 8. Michael thanked her and headed to the atrium. Lily was in her usual spot by the window, sketchbook open. But instead of drawing, she was staring out at the city skyline, her pencil untouched beside her. Good morning, Michael said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, offering a small nod of acknowledgement. Her eyes were tired, suggesting she hadn't slept well. She gestured to the chair across from her. Thanks for letting me join you today, Michael said as he sat down. How are you feeling? Lily picked up her sketchbook and wrote, I don't know. That's okay, Michael assured her. Days like this are complicated, she wrote again. They want me to go to the cemetery. I haven't decided. Whatever you choose is okay, Michael said. There's no right or wrong way to remember someone you love. Lily considered this, then wrote, How do you remember people? The personal question surprised him. After a moment, he answered, My dad died when I was 14. Heart attack. Every year on his birthday, I play his favorite song on guitar. It's my way of feeling connected to him. Lily looked intrigued. She wrote, What song? Bridge Over Troubled Water. Michael replied with a small smile. He used to sing it to me when I was little and couldn't sleep. Lily wrote again, My mom sang too. Lullabies when I was small. Then we sang together sometimes. Would you like to honor her memory through music? Michael asked gently. Lily's expression grew thoughtful. After a long pause, she nodded. We could create something together, Michael suggested. A musical remembrance. Not with words necessarily. Just sounds that express how you feel about her. The idea seemed to resonate with Lily. She wrote, Not here. Too many people. The conference room should be empty, Michael suggested. Or we could find another quiet space. Lily stood, gathering her things. She gestured for Michael to follow her. Instead of heading to the conference room, she led him to the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. When they exited, she guided him down a hallway to a door marked Roof Access. She pulled out a key card, presumably her father's, and swiped it. The rooftop garden was a surprise. Potted plants created little green islands among seating areas, and a small covered pavilion housed an outdoor meeting space. The view of the city was breathtaking. I didn't know this was up here, Michael said, looking around in appreciation. Lily wrote in her book. Dad had it built last year. Said Mom would have loved it. I come here sometimes when the office gets too much. They settled in the pavilion, sheltered from the light breeze. Michael took out his guitar and a small hand drum. What would you like to create for your mom? Lily thought for a long moment, then wrote, something that sounds like sunshine. She was always smiling. The description touched Michael. Sunshine, he repeated. I like that. Let's see. He began to play a gentle, uplifting melody on the guitar. Something in a major key with a warm, open sound. After establishing the pattern, he looked to Lily. Does this feel right for her? Lily closed her eyes, listening. Then she nodded and reached for the hand drum. She began to tap a gentle rhythm that complemented the guitar melody, her expression focused but peaceful. They played together for several minutes, the music flowing naturally between them. Then something remarkable happened. Lily began to hum, not the tentative sounds from their therapy sessions, but a clear, melodic line that wove around Michael's guitar playing. Her eyes remained closed, and there was a slight smile on her face as she hummed. The melody she created was beautiful in its simplicity, rising and falling like a voice in conversation with the guitar. Michael followed her lead, adjusting his playing to support her melody rather than direct it. The moment felt sacred somehow, a genuine expression of grief and love and memory translated into sound. When the music finally ended, Lily opened her eyes. There were tears on her cheeks, but she was still smiling faintly. That was beautiful, Michael said softly. Lily picked up her sketchbook and wrote, I think Mom heard it. I think she did too, Michael agreed, his own voice thick with emotion. Lily wrote again, her hand moving quickly. I want to go to the cemetery now. Will you come with me and Dad? The request was unexpected, but Michael understood the trust it represented. If your dad agrees, yes. Lily nodded and stood. As they packed up the instruments, she paused and placed her hand briefly on Michael's arm, a silent thank you that needed no words. In that moment, Michael realized that the plan was working, though not in the linear way Robert might have expected. Lily was finding her way back to expression, one note at a time. The road to her voice was being rebuilt, not through forced speech or traditional therapy, but through the universal language of music. 3 months had passed since that day on the rooftop. The change in Lily was subtle but unmistakable to those who knew her well. Her humming had become a regular form of expression, no longer limited to their therapy sessions. Robert mentioned that he sometimes heard her in her room, creating melodies that seemed to match her moods, gentle and flowing when she was calm, quick and staccato when frustrated. Michael had expanded their sessions to include other forms of sound expression. They'd moved from humming to vowel sounds, exploring the emotional qualities of ah, o, and e, without the pressure of forming actual words. Lily took to these exercises with increasing confidence, though she still used her sketchbook for everyday communication. On a warm Tuesday afternoon, Michael arrived at Skyline Technologies for their regular session to find the office in a state of unusual activity. Staff hurried about with purpose, and the reception area had been decorated with the company logo and blue and silver streamers. What's happening? He asked the receptionist. Quarterly company meeting, she explained. Mr. Chen presents the financial results and upcoming initiatives. Everyone attends, it's a big deal. She lowered her voice. There's a rumor he's announcing a major new project today. Michael nodded. Will Lily still be available for our session? Mr. Chen asked if you could wait until after the meeting. It should only be about an hour. She glanced at her computer. You can observe from the back if you'd like. They're holding it in the main conference center downstairs. Curious, Michael thanked her and headed to the elevator. He'd never seen the full company gathered together and thought it might give him more context for the environment Lily navigated. Each day, the conference center was filling rapidly with employees when he arrived. He found a spot along the back wall and watched as people filed in, greeting colleagues and finding seats. The energy in the room was positive, a mix of anticipation and professional pride. A few minutes later, Robert entered through a side door, accompanied by several executives Michael recognized from passing them in the hallways. Lily followed behind them, looking slightly uncomfortable with the crowd but determined to be present. She carried her sketchbook close to her chest like a shield. The room quieted as Robert took the stage. Michael was struck by the immediate command of attention he held. This was clearly a leader respected by his team. "Good afternoon, everyone," Robert began, his voice carrying easily through the room. "Thank you for taking time from your busy schedules for our quarterly meeting. Before we dive into the numbers, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible work you've all been doing." He proceeded to highlight several team achievements, calling out specific departments for recognition. Michael watched Lily, who stood quietly at the edge of the stage, occasionally glancing at her father with what looked like pride. The presentation continued with financial results that, even to Michael's untrained eye, appeared impressive. The mood in the room grew increasingly enthusiastic as Robert outlined the company's strong position in the market. "Now, for the news many of you have been waiting for," Robert said, his own excitement becoming evident. "I'm pleased to announce that Skyline Technologies will be launching a new division next quarter, focused on accessible technology for users with communication challenges." A murmur of interest ran through the crowd. Robert continued, "This initiative has become deeply personal to me over the past year." He glanced at Lily. "Many of you know that my daughter experienced trauma that affected her ability to communicate verbally. What you may not know is that this challenge led us to explore technologies and therapies that could bridge that gap." Michael straightened, surprised by the personal disclosure. Lily was watching her father intently now, her expression a mix of surprise and curiosity. "The new division will develop software and apps that help people with various communication barriers express themselves more effectively," Robert explained. "We've already secured partnerships with 3 major research universities and 2 hospitals to pilot our first products." The announcement was met with enthusiastic applause. Robert raised a hand to quiet the room. "This project wouldn't exist without the inspiration of one person." He turned toward Lily. "My daughter showed me that communication goes far beyond words, and that technology can build bridges where traditional methods fall short." Lily's eyes widened at being mentioned so directly. She clutched her sketchbook tighter. "I'd also like to acknowledge someone whose expertise helped shape this vision," Robert continued. "Michael Turner started working with us as a music therapist for Lily, but his insights have been instrumental in developing the foundational concepts for this new division." Michael felt a jolt of surprise at hearing his name. Several heads turned in his direction and he shifted uncomfortably under the sudden attention. "In fact," Robert added, "I'd like to offer Michael the position of therapeutic consultant for the new division, helping to ensure our technologies are genuinely beneficial from a therapeutic perspective. Michael, what do you say?" Put on the spot, Michael could only nod his acceptance, drawing a round of applause from the crowd. His mind raced with the implications. A full-time position doing meaningful work that combined his therapeutic background with practical applications. It was more than he'd dared hope for when he'd first applied to be a janitor. Robert smiled at his response, then turned back to the audience. "And now I'd like to introduce the person who will be heading this new division as creative director, overseeing the user experience design of all our new communication tools." He gestured toward Lily, who looked suddenly alarmed. This clearly hadn't been part of any plan she was aware of. "My daughter has been creating remarkable design concepts that will form the foundation of our new products," Robert explained. "Her personal experience combined with her artistic talent brings a unique perspective that will ensure our products truly serve the people who need them." Lily stood frozen, her eyes wide. Robert seemed to realize his mistake. He'd put her in a position where she was expected to acknowledge the crowd, perhaps even speak. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence as everyone waited. Michael could see the panic building in her expression. Without thinking, he moved toward the stage, hoping to somehow diffuse the situation. But before he could reach her, something unexpected happened. Lily took a deep breath, set her sketchbook down on a nearby chair, and stepped forward to stand beside her father. Her hands trembled slightly, but her posture was resolute. Robert looked at her with surprise, then understanding dawned on his face. "Would you like to say something?" he asked quietly, offering her the microphone. The entire room held its breath. Michael stopped in his tracks, heart pounding with concern and hope in equal measure. Lily took the microphone, held it for a long moment, and then, To the astonishment of everyone present, she spoke. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but clear. Just those two simple words spoken aloud for the first time in 3 years. The room erupted in spontaneous applause. Robert's eyes filled with tears. He wrapped an arm around his daughter's shoulders, speechless himself for a moment. Lily handed the microphone back and stepped away from the podium. As the applause continued, she looked directly at Michael across the room and smiled, a full, genuine smile that reached her eyes. In that moment, everything they had worked for over the past 3 months crystallized into those two spoken words, not forced or pressured, but offered when she was ready, when the moment mattered enough to break through the barriers. After the meeting concluded, Michael found himself surrounded by curious employees asking about his role and expertise. He answered as best he could while keeping an eye out for Lily. He finally spotted her with her father near the stage, still receiving congratulations from executives. When he finally made his way to them, Robert greeted him with an extended hand. "I hope you don't mind the public job offer," he said. "I was going to discuss it with you privately, but the moment seemed right." "It was unexpected but appreciated," Michael replied honestly. "Though perhaps a bit more notice before putting me or Lily in the spotlight might be good in the future." Robert had the good grace to look slightly abashed. "You're right. I got carried away with the moment." He turned to Lily. "I should have warned you both." Lily nodded in agreement, then opened her sketchbook and wrote. "But it worked out okay." Michael smiled at her. "More than okay." "You spoke, Lily. That was incredible." She wrote again. "It felt right. I wasn't planning it." "Those are often the best moments," Michael said, "when something happens naturally because you're ready, not because you're trying to force it." Robert checked his watch. "I have to get back to the executives for the next hour. Michael, can you still do your session with Lily?" "Of course." As they made their way to their usual conference room, Michael noticed Lily seemed lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted. Once inside, she set her sketchbook down on a table rather than keeping it close, a small but significant change. "How do you feel?" he asked as they settled into their usual spots. Instead of writing, Lily took a deep breath and said, in a voice raspy from disuse but gaining strength with each word, "Like, I found something I lost." Michael felt his own eyes grow moist. That's exactly what happened. They spent that session differently than any before. Michael didn't reach for any instruments and Lily didn't pick up her sketchbook. Instead, they talked, Lily speaking in short, sometimes halting sentences, Michael listening with patient attention, asking gentle questions when she struggled. Her voice grew steadier as the session continued. She explained that hearing her father talk about the new division, something born from her own challenge, had sparked something in her. "It made my silence feel selfish," she said carefully. "If my experience could help others, I should use my voice too." "Your silence was never selfish," Michael assured her. "It was your mind protecting itself while you healed." Lily nodded slowly. "But I'm stronger now." "You always were," Michael said. "You just needed to remember it." As their session ended, Lily asked, "Will you take the job? Working on the new products?" Michael nodded. "Yes, it's an amazing opportunity to help more people." "Good," she smiled. "We need your real plan." "My real plan?" Michael repeated, confused. "To help people find their voices," she explained. "Not just me. Everyone who needs it." Michael was touched by her perception. "That was always the dream, even when I was mopping floors." As they left the conference room, they passed the same hallway where Michael had pushed his janitor's cart 3 months earlier. Looking at photographs of company milestones, now he walked as a therapeutic consultant beside a young woman finding her voice again, step by step, word by word. The journey wasn't over. Lily would need time to rebuild her confidence in speaking, to process the emotions that came with breaking her silence. But the hardest step had been taken. The bridge between silence and expression had been crossed. Sometimes the most profound breakthroughs happen not with grand gestures or forced techniques, but in simple moments of courage, when someone decides they have something worth saying, even if it's just 2 words that leave an entire room speechless.